Hello, scholars. Welcome back. Let's talk about where do people go? Well, most recently, they're going to cities. Cities are growing. They're growing at very fast rates, and there is a transition from rural life to urban life, and with it, all kinds of environmental effects associated. Let's talk about what's happening as our cities grow. So here we'll look at the recent and rapid demographic trends that turns us into urbanites. We'll understand cities as functioning networks connecting a multitude of people, things, and information. We're going to look at the environmental and health effects associated with urbanization, opportunities for cities to create more resilient and sustainable living. We'll talk about sprawl, suburban sprawl. It's a big topic. It extends far and wide. That was a pun. Discuss how planning, participation, and design can actually create more sustainable, habitable, resilient cities and livable spaces. Let's get into cities. Henry Ford, most commonly associated with the automobile, had this idea that cities were these pestilent places that people were moving to, and the only option is to get out of the city. And how do we do that? We drive a car. We drive a car out of the city. Well, little did he know that the opposite was going to come true, where most people live in one place and drive a car into a city or into another place actually to work. Now, it does work this way. Who doesn't love a nice drive out in the countryside, going on a road trip, vacationing, experiencing the mountains? Cars are great. There's one in my household, and we utilize it to get outside and experience nature. But mostly, people use cars to get to where they're going away from where they live on a daily basis and then subject themselves to traffic. And it's been seen that bigger roads mean more cars, mean more traffic, and congestion. So this creates suburban living that's supported by infrastructure, such as roads, buildings, parking lots, strip malls, mini marts, you name it, with increased energy use, increased pollution, and less efficient use of the resources. So the bigger the city, the more stretched out or sprawled it gets, the greater the environmental impacts that are associated with it. We're undergoing an urban transition right now where the world is becoming more urbanized. In fact, it's happening at a tremendous rate. Here we see New York City with about 8 million people. This is an urban area where large numbers of people live together in dense settlements and work in non-agricultural jobs. And right now there's more than 1 million people per week being added to cities, and globally the population is growing at about the rate of 6 New York-sized cities every year. So 6 more of these every year. What? That's astounding. That's a lot of people either being born in cities or moving to cities. Rapid urbanization is happening right now in real time. Okay, so people are moving into cities. Let's do a little background. So right now there's more people in Tokyo than the total population of Earth 6,000 years ago, when cities were just beginning to form. The dawn of the Fertile Crescent, the move of from hunter-gatherer to agricultural societies, the boom, the increase of human population. And historically and today, we see that cities are centers of trade, transportation, and political power. There's a lot of people in a city. There's a lot of economic wealth in a city. There's a lot of political power that comes with these centers of urbanization. The first city over 1 million people was London in 1800, and today nearly 25% of all people, a quarter of the world's population, live in cities with 1 million people. more statistics that are all pointing to the direction that say, we love to live in cities. And I live in a city. You may live in a city. You may live outside of the city. We all have our reasons for where we choose to live. But city centers can be places of increased opportunity and economic achievement and attainment. The projections show that in about 30 years, 2050, urban populations will double. It's a lot of people on Earth living in a lot of cities, both from human population growing and from people moving into them. So we see that urbanization has a far-reaching environmental impact. We talked about the ecological footprint, how much land is necessary to support a person. Well, it turns out in cities, the amount of land is really great because of the concentration of the amount of people. Not only that, but these cities can increase resource extraction, increased waste generation, resulting in high levels of pollution and humongous ecological footprints. If we take the Bay Area here, which is Contra Costa, Alameda, San Mateo, San Francisco, and Marin counties, the people who live in the Bay Area have an environmental footprint that's almost the entire state of California. That's just one metropolitan area. You could call it a megalopolis, where you have all of these different metropolitans that are basically stacked one right on top of the other. They're right next to each other, really. That's a huge footprint for people living in cities. So cities are resource intensive, waste intensive, environmental impact heavy. Health problems associated with urban living: smog, pollution, contaminated drinking water, decrease to open space, noise pollution, light pollution. There's a lot of things that go on. There's pros and cons to everything. Two sides to every coin, you could say. Well, some of these health problems are considered the urban penalty. Now, sanitation and public health have decreased mortality rates in urban areas to less than those in rural areas globally. But there are still aspects and areas of cities that do not fare so well and can contribute to very poor public health. There's lots of opportunities in cities. We see that when a person moves to a city with twice the number of people, that person produces 15% more income. Your revenue generating capabilities are increased. You have a greater income capacity because of networks or connections that lead to greater opportunities. More people, more friends, more opportunities, more wealth. Hey, that sounds like a great thing, right? So yes, cities are economic opportunity centers. And hey, that's great. Who doesn't want to increase their earning potential and gain in wealth to support a lifestyle that is comfortable? I think we all want that. An increase in urban density, or the number of residents in a space, benefits due to an economy of scale where the per capita cost for services decreases, resulting on the increasing scale of operations. So, more people, more businesses, less people have to spend at the businesses because there's so many of them. So not only do cities provide an opportunity to make more money, but your costs can also go down also. More people using shared resources in urban areas, such as roads and other infrastructure, allows opportunities to solve environmental problems. It's better when we work together. Let's work together and come up with really great ideas for how we can solve the world's environmental problems through gains in efficiency, reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, sharing heating and cooling usage. This happens by living in multi-dwelling buildings and shared spaces. We're sharing the impact by sharing the buildings. And sharing buildings happens in highly developed urban centers. With urbanization comes slums. Slums are going to be settlements in area that are composed of lots of people living in substandard housing. They don't own property. There's inadequate urban services and extremely high rates of poverty. Now, these come up with different cities. Here are the Dharavi settlements. Slum is also called a squatter settlement because the people don't own property there. They just live there. And Dharavi settlement in Mumbai, India is a square mile that has 600,000 people. That's a lot of people in a really small space. And the urban services for those people are insufficient, inadequate to maintain a healthy style of living. Slums have developed with cities as cities have developed. Paris, London, New York were defining factors of the 19th century with industrialization, and then they put in policies that governed living conditions. New York had slums. Those slums were lived in by more than half of the population. Shanty towns developed near water with poor ventilation, no indoor plumbing. Well, what do we do about slums? Ideas have been, let's just move everyone out, build them housing, that's good. Well, that's been tried, it hasn't worked. Upgrading, city planning, resource development. There are ways for urbanization to happen that can mitigate the impacts and the presence of these slum-like conditions. Slums support people, though, let's not forget. They're areas of cities that people live, and people are awesome, people are amazing, and people work together. And in these slums, they create what's called a bright light syndrome, where the people move to cities because they see the city as this place of opportunity, excitement, freedom, and then they move into the city and they're planted in these slums because they don't have the opportunities they thought, and then they develop their own informal economy. People selling goods and services to the other people in the slums, making connections, creating a sense of cultural identity within these slums. The slums become their own support network. So inherently, are they a bad thing? No, they're like little cities within these bigger cities. They just don't have the same access to resources. Now, this is a case of environmental justice. As humans, we have a right to fair and equal treatment, opportunity, availability to the world's resources. So slums can be an area where environmental justice can really, really help support the residents who are living inside of them. Slums develop in the cities. People who don't live in slums feel they want to move away from the slums. And then they move outside of the cities to the suburbs. The suburban sprawl is the spread of urban populations away from city centers, where policies increase the supply of land for development while reducing the transportation costs associated with commuting. Basically, it's move out of the city, you can buy this land, we'll build roads that take you into the city, you'll pay less and you'll have more space, but suburban sprawl is less dense, more resource intensive, literally because it's taking up more land. Now, this provides its own environmental and social challenges. Urban sprawl is, and if we look at a map of the United States at night, you can see areas that are lit up. These cities are growing bigger. They're sprawling out. More lights, more people, more space, more land, more consumption, more impact. Certain areas, metropolitan, grow bigger into clusters of metropolitans called Metropolis, And when these metropolis grow together, they become a megalopolis. Here we can see the megalopolis is lit up from Boston to New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, all the way down to Washington, D.C. So this is an artifact of our growing cities now. People are moving to cities. Cities are sprawling out. Neighboring cities are sprawling next to each other, and they're turning into these giant infrastructures of huge, basically individual cities that compose one huge city, but we call this a megalopolis. So there's specific characteristics of sprawl. Suburbs are one-use zones or distinct zones that serve a particular purpose, and we can think about how we use the land in this floor-to-area ratio. Out here in suburban homes, we have 3 to 4 dwellings per an acre. Well, you could have 2 apartment complexes with 30 dwellings and have twice as much space. You could have all of those dwellings in a high-rise and have even more space. And so when homes, single-family homes, are developed in these subdivisions, then they're taking more space than the different types of apartments or multifamily units that can be associated with city centers. This has a larger impact. Literally, you need more space for less people. And if we're thinking about the earth and humans in terms of our ecological footprint and how much space do we need when we take more space, we're using more space. It's very logical. So problems go with it. Here we see a farm, open space, abutted next to encroaching sprawl. And so when you have suburban sprawl like this, people travel longer distances. There's greater consumption of gasoline. There is not so much land available for agriculture. There's lots of natural ecosystems that are changed. Forests are cut down, wetlands are filled in to make space for housing. Houses need space, and when houses stretch out over long distances, the land will be changed, land use change, to become viable for those houses that are living there. So one of the main environmental effects of suburban sprawl is the fact that you're removing habitat from its natural state. And if you remove habitat, then you decrease the availability for the different types of biodiversity that have evolved and adapted to live within those very specific habitats. We've seen streets change over time from the conventional grid pattern to a curvilinear to conventional, where you have a series of roads, maybe one main access road, and lots of cul-de-sacs. And so what this has done is it has made neighborhoods less pedestrian friendly and disconnected us. More conventional routes led to greater access, more people on the streets, more pedestrian access. And so what suburban sprawl has done is it has shifted us from walking places using public transportation to driving everywhere. Increased automobiles, increased gasoline, more fossil fuels, more pollution, higher impacts. So how did we get here? Because sprawl is pretty common. A lot of us live in suburbs. Fresno is sprawled in every single direction over the years, and this is the case with most cities. And it's not necessarily a bad thing if you live in a neighborhood that is a suburb. No, in fact, culturally, this is the American dream that was offered to us. After World War II, there was the baby boom. 10 million new households were necessary. And this idea that moving up in social status and moving up in class was to move out of the city, to buy your own house. This is the American dream. Separates you from heavy industry. Negative effects was it divided people by race, class, ethnicity, and religion. It was extremely discriminatory on who could buy homes and who could get loans. And so it was divisive. Suburban sprawl is a main factor in systemic racism that continue to perpetuate a system of inequality. Well, at this point in time, we're discussing what is sprawl, where did it come from, what are the impacts environmentally and socially, and while we won't get completely into the social science of what's going on, the increase in urbanization and sprawl led to an economic inequality that has been felt and that we're currently addressing and trying to solve some of these problems that were created from suburban sprawl. Most specifically, redlining. City planners looked at maps and drew red lines and said that in these areas, no Black or Asian communities were allowed to live outside of these. They couldn't get loans. They weren't allowed in. This is a form of segregation and discrimination. It's drawing lines and telling people they can or can't live there. It's decreasing opportunity. Well, now we know this has happened. It's public knowledge. This is out there. It's not okay. And there are ways in which we can now support our... This is partly where it comes, the idea of marginalized communities. We literally drew margins around communities and marginalized them. City planners, people, businessmen, politicians. This is not okay. Now, creating social networks that support, that break down these walls, that acknowledge this is a real thing. This is important. This is the move forward. Environmental justice, it's saying we have problems that aren't okay. How do we work together to solve these problems? Environmental problems, that's mainly what we're talking about in this course, environmental. But we're talking about the human component of these things, and this is a really horrible thing that happens. And in my romantic view of the world and moving forward to live peacefully, harmoniously, in sustainability with our earth and our people, that's also amongst the people who live there, creating economic opportunity for everyone. Marginalized, wealthy communities, having it be fair, equal, and providing equity for all. Very important. Sprawl led to tract housing, mass-produced homes. This wasn't a thing before the 30s and the 40s. The baby boom came out, and these large landowners, land developers said, look at all these babies, look at all these families, look at all these people. We need houses. Okay, let's build. How do we build the most houses as fast as possible, make them cheap, get people in them? This is how sprawl happens. And again, it became the American dream to move out of the cities and buy your own home. And yeah, who doesn't want to own their own home? Own your own piece of property. That's awesome. How can we do that in ways that are decreasing our environmental impact, living sustainably, and supporting fair and equal practices for everybody? That's a question. It's a question I think about. So what came with urbanization? Suburbs, roads, highways, freeways. The 1950s, Eisenhower came out and developed the interstate system. Awesome. It connected places with big roads. Those big roads connect people from outside of cities to inside of cities. We've seen so much government spending on roads and infrastructure, and as cities grow, infrastructure is an important component. We need roads that work. It's pretty simple there. Over time, sprawl has led to greater consumption, bigger home size. Even though our fertility rate is decreasing overall as a nation, our home size is increasing. If our home sizes are increasing, then our consumption is increasing. In the 50s, a home of 983 square feet supplied a home for 3.5 people. 2004, 2,400 square feet is now the home size for 2.5 people. So our houses are bigger, our families are smaller. We're getting one thing to stabilize, but it's not isolated. Cities aren't isolated. Human population growth isn't isolated. Food isn't isolated. It all works together. And if you feel like you need to sit down, I feel it too. But it's okay, because every single day we have opportunities to do better and to be better. And before we can, we just got to learn about them. We got to talk about them. We have to be transparent about what we're doing and share in some of the excitement that's going on. I ride a bicycle to school every single day, and my life feels better because of it. I also like bikes probably more than your average person. I like bikes a lot. I lived on a bike for a year, traveled around Southeast Asia for 6 months, came back, rode my bicycle across the United States from the West Coast, from the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean, and it's an integral part of my life. I choose to live in the city where I am within 3 miles of where I work, because I have found that outside of 3 miles, the tendency is to drive more. When I drive more, I'm less happy. When I bike every day, super happy. So this is how I've come to understand little ways that I can contribute to my own happiness and also contribute to decreasing my impact and working in a way that sustainable cities can operate. Little contributions from me, from you, from everyone, equal big contributions from all of us. City planners can look at cities and develop ways, because we're people, we're communal individuals, we're communal species, and when we're around each other, I think our lives are better. Loneliness, isolation, depression, these are all artifacts of not having real human connection. And when cities are designed to support human connection, that's awesome. So urban design can support community interactions. Our city planning can literally help us in our quality of life. That's so cool. Urban planning is the development of guidelines to shape the future of an area. Through the ages, we've seen things that work. We've seen things that don't work. Redlining, no, not cool. Multi-use areas, yes, very cool. Access to green space, incredibly important. Being able to walk outside and put your feet in the dirt, earth down, tremendously important. Being around other people, it's great. It's great for us. These are shaped by urban planning. But it's hard. It's not easy to do. And it's not easy to get right, and sometimes we get it wrong. And then you've got, how are we going to plan California? How are we going to plan Fresno? How are we going to plan the Tower District? Different layers of government with different priorities, different scales of the hierarchy leads to the planner's dilemma, where we have large scale and small scale needs. You have needs of industry and you have needs of residents. You have needs of commercial, and how do these all work together, knowing that there's also slums and poverty and equity gaps that need to be solved. These are big questions. How do we design a city to support everyone while minimizing the impact on the environment? Big topic. And then you bring in natural disaster, hurricanes, floods, tornadoes. And how do cities respond? And what we've seen is that, and especially in the case of Katrina, people come together to support their neighbors. People come together to feed and clothe and house those that are displaced. Well, we also need governments to come in and say, okay, we need better planning projects. We need evacuation plans. We need a resilience officer, a person whose entire job is to say, what happens when disaster strikes? Important for thinking about cities is what happens when things go wrong? Probably, it's kind of like a backup plan. It's good for all of us to have some sort of a backup plan. Transportation is really important. So when you design a city that is walkable, people will walk. When you design a city that is drivable, people will drive. When you make a freeway bigger, more cars come on the road, and you have more traffic. As I mentioned earlier, traffic is one of my non-negotiables. I cannot live where I have to drive every single day. I want to be on my bicycle and be able to pedal to work, to my friends' houses. I want to be able to, of course, I want to drive to go to the mountains and go to the beach. And I have a car in my household, but I don't use it every single day. And so developing cities for multi-use transit, hugely important for decreasing environmental impacts. Mass transit, buses, subways, light rails, really important. Walking and biking options, really important. This is in the hands of city planners, and it's been done well through the past, and it's been done very, very poorly. Transit and density are intricately related, and city planning needs to integrate mass transit in order to decrease road congestion, in order to decrease the amount of people that will be in cars every single day. There's lots of advantages to mass transit, but only when it's utilized. Empty buses driving through town have a greater impact than people driving in their cars. Areas where you cannot walk or bike promote people driving their cars. So how do we say, here is a high-density urban area, how do we get people around from one place to the other without them needing to be car-dependent? This, again, is in the hands of city planners, the developers who are actually guiding the construction and the upgrades and future development of our cities. Cities are changing. We've learned a lot. Suburban sprawl isn't even 100 years old. Now, mixed-use areas, a mixture of housing, shops, restaurants, grocery stores, offices, public amenities, all within a half mile of public transportation. How can you get everything you need without having to get into your car? Wouldn't that be awesome? Walk down to the corner store for a quick couple items, take a bus to the grocery store, ride your bike to work, all of these things. It's moving forward because if human population continues to grow and more people are moving into cities, cities are becoming more dense. How do we handle that? And do we all have to drive 45 minutes to go get groceries? That doesn't seem sustainable. Can we zone and plan for people to be able to get what they need within areas that are accessible? How walkable is your neighborhood? How walkable is the area where you work? How much do you walk? Walking is incredibly healthy. We were designed evolutionarily to walk and to run and to move our bodies. Motion is life. Movement is life. Move as much as you can. Your body will thank you. If it's under a mile, do you need to drive there? Can you walk to every trip that's under a mile? What trips are within a mile? How is the walkability of your area, and how is that connecting to your quality of life? Again, lots of questions. I'm not here to tell you to make changes, to do differently, but to provide opportunities for reflection on our habits and our lifestyles. I'm constantly thinking about what I'm doing. How is this affecting you and me? Does this make me happy? And it's hard to constantly be updating, but it's also kind of fun and it's kind of exciting. and it keeps life interesting and it keeps it fresh, especially with this new lens we put on the environmentalist glasses, and now we're looking through the earth like, wow, everything I do has an impact. How is the walkability of your city, your neighborhood? What is the development like? Is it transit-oriented, looking to integrate public transportation and land use patterns in more resilient ways? Is it pedestrian-oriented, looking at strategies to integrate pedestrian travel? Are there bike sharing? Are there bike paths, bike lanes? Is the infrastructure there for you to be able to not drive a car? Because if it's not, guess what? You have to drive a car. Transit-oriented and pedestrian-oriented development opportunities. This is city planning that's taking an integrative look at what are the things that will decrease impact, that will increase quality of life, and help to provide equal access across the board. Green infrastructure. You can get LEED certified buildings. And that's basically saying, okay, if we're going to be making new houses, new buildings, can they be environmentally friendly? And it seems like you can almost get an organic label smacked on anything, and you have to really check into the validity of whether it's actually there. But the idea is awesome. Can we build or update our buildings with this LEED certification, contributing to healthier, happier lifestyles? That sounds so good. Let's design and construct healthy buildings for a happy environment. So builders are considering environmental impacts. There's this living building challenge that is the most ambitious green building standards for architects and engineers around the world. It's a whole new wave, new urbanization. Can we build walkable, bikeable streets that are integrated with mass transit that are environmentally friendly, making our way towards a sustainable future? It's called sustainable development, and it can be residential, industrial, commercial. And really what this is at this point, wow, what a wild idea. Sustainable development? I think at some point it is going to be the idea. Oh, this is how we build. We build sustainably. Why? Because we want to not exploit all of our Earth's resources. We're not there yet, but I feel confident. I believe in us as people that we can get there to this place where building, cities, infrastructure, transit are all collaborating to help support you and I to living our best life. So what can you do? Well, we can become city planners. We can join city planning meetings. We can have a voice. We can choose where we live. You can choose how you travel. You can communicate with your friends. You can carpool. We can think about any potential changes that we might make in our lives to support our communities, decrease our impact, and create an environment that we love to live in. Live in a place that we absolutely love. And if you're not there yet and you're limited by some confounding factors, the thing that you can do absolutely is believe in yourself, believe in your ability to work hard and gain those which are that which is important to you. You can have it through hard work and belief. The life that you want to live is available to you. And I promise you that. I believe in you, and I believe that so strongly. It takes hard work and belief to achieve our dreams. This is the secret to success. And now you know part of the hard work is gaining the knowledge to understand and to learn what is important and how can the things that are important to us be environmentally friendly. So with that, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one.